Today we're going to repair this carburetor off a 2003 Polaris Scrambler 500. And the reason I removed this is because, for one thing, it's leaking gas out of the bottom of this tube right here. So if you loosen this screw, that'll drain your bowl. But if the screw is tight and you're leaking out of here, that means you're overflowing your bowl. There's too much gas in the bowl and it's going to drip out of here. So what's most likely happened is the needle seat, the rubber tip on it, has swollen because of the ethanol and the gasoline, and that's causing this to not shut off properly. And you can see all the drip that's been happening by how clean the bottom of the carburetor is, because the gas is washing all the dirt off. Okay, and when you just open the air box on this thing, it's just a horrible smell, of intense smell of gasoline. It shouldn't be that bad. I noticed the idler adjuster screw is completely stuck, not working at all. And when I took it off, I also realized this whole assembly is a little bit loose right here, so I need to tighten that up. So before we tear anything apart though, I'm going to take this thing and scrub it down real good with just like a nylon bristle brush, knock all this dirt off I can, spray it all down and clean this thing up as good as I can before I try to disassemble anything. And I'll get it cleaned up and we'll come back and we'll go from there. Okay, so we can see it looks a whole lot better now that I've cleaned the dirt off the outside. We also can see that it's an original Mikuni carburetor from Japan. So it makes me real happy because that means I know I can clean this one up and fix whatever's wrong with it and have it work correctly on the ATV. The problem with the new one that I'm probably going to buy just to use parts out of is there's a lot of jetting that's going on inside this thing. And if it's not perfect, the bike is not going to run right. You can see on this unit, there's one adjustment. That's your idle speed. That's it. There's no mixture adjustment on this carburetor. There's only two possible jets you can change. One's this air jet right here, and one is the main jet and inside the bowl. That's it. There's a lot of other orifices that are going on inside of here that are just not going to be, if they're not all correct, it's just not going to run right. So I prefer to use the original carburetor. I've already taken this one apart and found out what's wrong, and also just to make sure I don't take too long showing you how to disassemble it. But we need to totally disassemble almost everything out of this to be able to soak the main body of this into in a strong solution to clean it out properly. Okay, so it means you have to get every bit of plastic, rubber O-rings, everything out of it because it's going to destroy them. So I'm going to just take loose the throttle screw first of all. I've already taken this apart, like I said, to make sure I could do it a little quicker and show you a little better how it comes apart. I've also figured out what's wrong and what's making mine flood real bad. Okay, so I'm going to show you that, plus some of the other problems you might face. Okay, so we got the throttle adjustment screw off. I'm going to start with the top. Okay, the top, there's a diaphragm and a spring, and there's also a needle that goes inside of here. The needle goes all the way down inside of there into what's called a Venturi tube. Okay, this whole unit moves up and down like this, and as it moves up and down, it moves that needle, and this is for your main circuit. As your needle moves up, it exposes more holes in that Venturi, allowing more gas to enter the carburetor. Okay, so let's take this unit off. If you have a problem with this diaphragm being bad, your carburetor is not going to work very well at all. And full disclosure, all these screws, I couldn't get any of them loose. I took a little piece of vice grips, put it on the two screws on the top and the two screws on the bottom. I couldn't get them loose, so I just used my vice grips. You may have to do the same. And we're going to take these two screws off the top first. Remember, this is under spring pressure, so hold it down while you're taking the screws off. And you're going to see underneath here is going to be that diaphragm. As we lift this off, as you see, it's going to be a spring attached to the cap. And that spring has a little plastic keeper on the end of it. It's very important. This is what your needle goes into on one end of the needle. If I leave the diaphragm in place and turn this upside down, there's going to be my needle. See, this needle has a nylon washer on it. And oh my goodness, I'm missing a part. It's come off. Here it is, right here. I don't know how that came off. I'm going to put this back in the right spot too. It's a little C-clip that goes on here. And the position you have this, there's several different notches on this needle. And the position you put that C-clip in changes how this needle operates. So this comes out from there, and then we can pull the whole diaphragm out. Okay, got to inspect this rubber diaphragm for any tears. This whole diaphragm, I saved this just in time. This whole diaphragm was soaked with gas when I took it apart because this carburetor is flooding so bad. Only a short amount of time before you will just deteriorate all this rubber. There's not supposed to be any gas in here. So I caught this just in time. But these are kind of expensive. It's another reason why I buy the cheap knockoff carburetor, because you can use this part out of it without having to buy it separately. It's not going to come with a rebuild kit a lot of times. And this inner plastic piece, we're going to also have to take this out. This will be how we get out the whole Venturi tube. But we can't take this out until we remove the bowl off the bottom and take off the main jet. Okay, so we're just going to turn her over. I'm going to take off the 2 screws on the bottom of the bowl. Same thing, I loosened these with a vice grips because I could not break them free, and I didn't want to strip the heads of the screws off. So don't be afraid to use a little extra persuasion of a vice grips. Okay, so I'm going to take this screw out and we'll turn this straight up and down here. Position a little bit better so you can see. Okay. We're going to remove the bowl straight up off the top. Now obviously it's really not sitting flat. This would be sitting like this in the car or inside the bike. Now here's our floats. You can see this is how the floats operate when they're sitting in here, up and down. And this is where all my problem lies. 2 problems I got. You can also see inside of here is the needle seat that moves up and down. Inside of here is what your float is actually pushing against. So I'm going to lift this whole assembly up, and the needle will come with the floats. Okay, here it is on the end. And you can just take this needle right off the end of the clip there. And one of your main problems is going to be the rubber tip on the end of this needle swelling up because of the ethanol in our fuel. And this swells up. It does not want to move inside of this bore properly. It gets stuck inside of here. Okay, so that's one problem. This one's actually in okay shape. It's not the problem. But you saw how easily this came out. This has an O-ring here that should hold this in place. I'm going to get this in place right. And this is not doing anything. You see where the O-ring sits in there. It's not holding anything. It's not sealing anything at all. Okay, so that's a real problem right there. And then the bigger problem is the needle seat. Okay, the needle drops down in there and closes off the interior hole. That's probably working. What's not working is this. See how loose that is? So O-ring on the inside of this, and that O-ring is just flattened out. It's not doing anything. This should not be that loose. With that mechanical fuel pump, even though I'm closing off the needle, I'm probably spraying gas all around inside of here, just flooding the whole carburetor all the time. Okay, so I need to replace the O-ring on this. I need to replace the O-ring on the end of the float as well. Okay, should be able to get all those out of a new carburetor and reuse them. The last thing we need to take apart is going to be this Venturi, that plastic tube that I showed you that goes in the inside. So we're going to take the main jet off. Just going to unscrew the main jet. This is another item that could easily be incorrect in a replacement carburetor. This is matched for your car, for your ATV. There's a spacer here that goes on top, small side on top, bigger side on the bottom, so it fits over that Venturi tube. And here you kind of have to just, I want you to notice before we take this out, there's a notch. And you see that? There's a notch in this tube here. And there's see a little, like a dimple right here. That goes all the way through to the other side. It lines up with this notch. So this tube has to be perfectly lined up with that for it to go in and out. Okay, and it's just a little tiny stuck at the end. We just tap it down a little bit. That's going to knock that tube. This is that tube I just knocked down right inside of here. Okay. Now, to get it all the way out, we have to remove this plastic piece, and it's just stuck down in there. Really nothing holding it other than it's just stuck, tight fit. So I used a pair of needle nose and grabbed somewhere safe that I'm not going to hurt anything. Let me show you. And just pull out straight out. Okay? Just like so. And you'll see that Venturi will come with you. Okay? And if you look closely, you see all the little holes that are in it? This is what your needle is going in and out of there. So the more the diaphragm opens up, the more the needle comes out, and the more holes are exposed, allowing fuel to go in. So the more you push on the throttle, the more holes get exposed. Now, you can take this whole piece out of here completely, this Venturi tube, and soak all of this down. Make sure all these orifices are really cleaned out really well. Okay, goes back in from the top only. All right. And like I said, when you go to push this back in, that groove has to be lined up with the spot right here. If you look inside, you can see inside that hole, there's a little spot that lines up with this groove. Okay, when you slide all this back together, you have it lined up right. And from here, I have a little plastic cap is all I have. I can't put inside the solution. And from here, everything's removed. But I want to show you a few other reasons why the other carburetors do not work. If you look inside of this hole right here, there's at least 5 orifices down inside of here. Okay. Every one of those orifices has a specific design, a specific dimension. If we look inside the throttle bore itself, we'll see at least 4 of these holes. Might be hard for me to show you exactly, but there's going to be 4 holes. There's 1 here, and there's 3 more behind it. Those are all your fuel sources for your idle and your transition circuits of your carburetor. Okay, so all those have to be nice and cleared out, and if any of them aren't the right size, it's not going to work right. There's no other adjustments to this carburetor. This is this is probably for the idle air bleed that you could change out if you had to change for your elevation that you were living at. So you're living at a real high elevation, you'd probably have to change the idle air bleed, and you have a main jet. That's the only adjustments you have. So if the carburetor's not made right, it's not gonna function right. Disassemble this completely, clean all out your original one, use your gaskets and your O-rings and even your diaphragm if you need to from a replacement carburetor. use them inside your old carburetor. Okay, it's really not that hard to clean out, take this apart, guys, and you can use this video as a reference to remember how everything goes. So I'm almost certain once I put the new parts in there, this bike is going to run fantastic. So hope this helped everybody. I appreciate y'all watching. See you next time.